on page 185, he talks about democracy, which I thought was interesting. So there's kind of 2 points here. So first of all, he says that should you criticize the administration, and that Jubal's talking here. Jubal is actually, like I said, a very good character and has some very good. I think Jubal may be Heinlein's kind of. He uses Jubal to speak for him, just kind of like Plato used Socrates sometimes to speak for him. So he says here that gadflies are necessary, people who watch and then criticize the government. But it's well to look at the new rascals before you turn your present rascals out. So there's the first point. You should be sure to look at the alternatives before you decide to throw out someone. Let's say someone does something corrupt in the government. You may want to consider who might replace that person before you throw them out, because maybe that was a mistake, or maybe they won't do it again. And maybe the new person that would have replaced them if you impeach them or whatever, maybe the new person would be worse, right? So that's point one. The second point, and I'll keep reading here, democracy is a poor system. The only thing that can be said for it is that it's 8 times as good as any other method, which of course is just a way of, Churchill's famous quote, right? Its worst fault is that its leaders reflect their constituents, a low level. So I thought that was interesting. So if you can consider other government types, theocracies, monarchies, essentially it's a variant on dictatorship, really. These people are not selected by the people. They are endorsed by the people, but for another reason. They're endorsed because of a bloodline or because of religious superiority, let's say. They're not selected in a democracy. But in a democracy, when you have to worry about populism, now you're having people selecting someone that they think are like them or understand them, etc. And so in democracy, the point here is that you tend to get lesser candidates. You tend to get people that are like the people there. And if the people are already debased in a variety of ways, then their leaders are going to be debased. Because if you're a person who's debased in whatever, there's all kinds of ways you could be, you're not going to pick someone you think is superior to you in character, in morality, in wealth, etc. You're going to look at that as not so great. If you cannot pick and your criterion is singular, such as in a monarchy or a theocracy, then those things don't matter, because all that matters is that they are divine, or that they are, have a certain bloodline, have a certain famous family history or whatever, right? So I think the point is well taken, that in democracy you're going to get a kind of populism, and the only way to really mess with that would be to then carefully select the candidates. So I think that happens, and I think that's actually the effect. That's what happens, is that in Canada or the United States, people don't get as much choice on the candidates, but they get choice at the end when they're to vote. So all you have to do now is to make sure that the candidates are good people or whatever. And then the populism then can take over, because it doesn't matter now. You've already restricted the choices. You've only got Democrats and Republicans in the States. There's only 2. So we're almost a monarchy. We're almost a dictatorship. There's only 2 parties instead of 1. Right? In Canada, there's 3 parties. 2, maybe 2.5, you could say. 2.5 parties in Canada. Right? There's 2 main parties in Britain, Labour and Conservative. So, and as long as you carefully select those candidates, you are essentially then trying to combat populism. And the populism, people will tend to vote in people they think are like them. And that might not necessarily be a good candidate.